Hi there, I'm Beth Ramsden, and today I've put together something of a more generic Blythe doll customizing tutorial for you. The footage I've recorded for this is of my recent custom Floretta. Of course, we will start with a base doll. I tend to buy mine from AliExpress. These aren't genuine Blythe dolls from either Takara or Good Smile, etc. So I find these are more comfortable to work with, especially for first-time customizers. Of course, you can, if you choose, customize a genuine Blythe doll. However, you might find some differences, namely parts being glued together, scalps being glued down on older models. So here I've received my base doll and checked that she's all working before I begin. Then to start disassembling, ready for customizing, I unscrew the 3 screws on the back of her head. I double check that the scalp isn't glued down to the head anywhere before I start pushing and prodding, and with a very firm grip on each ear, I will squeeze the head on a soft surface to try to separate the front and back halves of the head. Sometimes you might just want to push down on the surface, but keep working until you hear a click. The pieces are separate, but don't pull them apart too enthusiastically, as there's still a spring in there holding the front and back together. We're going to unlatch that in a moment. Open the bottom part of the head and the body should come out very easily. We can then carefully look inside, and with needle nose pliers or similar tool, try to open and gently unhook the spring from the back faceplate. You can fully remove the spring and keep it safe just in case you want to replace it, and keep a single pull cord for functioning the eyes. I tend to add a second pull cord which lets me open and close the eyelids manually. The scalp is removed from the front faceplate with this screw and can just lift away easily. Keep the hair somewhere safe while you work on the rest. Untie the pull ring and remove the cord from the inside of the faceplate. Next, we're going to unscrew this little plastic piece, which is called the T-bar. It's essential for the functioning of the eye mechanism, so keep it safe. Here I'm removing the rest of the spring as well. I use a flat-headed screwdriver and very carefully prise the white part of the eyeball away from the plastic of the eyelid. Once the little nub has popped out, I'm able to pull the 2 pieces apart and carefully remove them from the faceplate. The stem is shaped in such a way that it should only fit with the same eye positions lined up. Without the eyeballs in there, the rest of the eyelid plastic is more pliable and is easily removed like so. I usually like to customize the eyelids, so to prepare them, I usually pull out the existing eyelashes and will sand down the eyelids along with the faceplate later. Also, in preparation for customizing, I usually remove the default eye chips, the coloured irises in the mechanism. I soak them in freshly boiled water for a few minutes and prepare a candle and chop up a couple of glue sticks, which I will be melting with the candle. They can be reused and you can trim off any rough parts after they've been used a few times. Heat them over the flame just for a few seconds and press gently onto the coloured part of the eye chip. You don't want the glue splurging over the edges, and you want to sit them down and let them cool fully before pulling. They should come away easily, and the glue stick can be removed from the eye chip gently with your fingernail, being careful not to scratch the surface, and then they can be reused if you want. I do recommend using full-sized glue sticks for this, not the mini ones. Grab a decent face mask because we're going to do some sanding. I like the 3M branded spongy sandpaper, but you can use any other kinds of sandpaper, ideally with a wet spray to help minimize dust flying around. It's good to start with a fairly high grit, like 600 or 800, because you don't want to introduce scratches right at the start. You only want it to be rough enough to remove the existing sealant and face up. You can fold up smaller pieces of sandpaper to get into crevices. And I really recommend these Magic Eraser cleaning sponges for wiping away dust and cleaning throughout the process. This will give us a nice even surface to start our custom face up with. I usually have some sort of face in mind before I begin. I might have a Pinterest board open for inspiration, but generally I'll start with a regular pencil on the surface of the face without makeup distractions while everything's still symmetrical, and I'll sketch in where I plan to make my initial carvings. So darker, thicker colour where I really plan to cut away the plastic. For this custom, I was going to do some reshaping of the eyes, which I've marked in using the eyelids to get symmetrical marks, but generally I'm just adding definition to the nose and reshaping the lips to give a new expression or just a more realistic face. When I was starting out with customizing, I was impatient and wanted fast results, and so a lot of the work I did was using a Dremel tool or a rotary tool because it would take away material more quickly and I could see the results. However, now I tend to use only hand tools and very little Dremel type sculpting. I find nowadays that hand tools leave a lot less marking on the face, which saves me a lot of sanding work later on. I use some basic wood carving tools along with curved blade, they're medical scalpels, curved riffler files and jewellery files, metal, and even gouging tools, some lino tools here, which are both pointed and curved so they can scoop away the plastic. And it tends to be those curved scooping gouging tools that I begin each face up with. I usually start around the nose, carving away the plastic in towards and sort of down towards the new crease that I want around the sides of the nose. Wherever I've marked the position of my nostrils, I usually use a hand drill and a drill bit to gently deepen those nostrils. I can put other rotary tool bits into the handle I use for the drill bit and use that in conjunction with the files and gouging tools to remove material where I had planned. The files in particular still can leave some messy marks on the face, so I use a curved scalpel blade to gently scratch and scrape away any of the deep gouges. It's important to change the direction that you're doing this with because this motion itself can leave little scratches and marks that all move in one particular direction and then can be quite obvious. In order to define the new lip outline, I tend to scrape away from the line that I've drawn that you see and just repeat this motion again and again all the way around the lip line, and this will cut away the material outside of the lip shape that you want. Again, switching direction now and again so you're not getting deep grooves, and you'll see that this creates the impression that the lips are raised away from the rest of the face. I use a scalpel or wood carving tool to cut away at the middle of the lips, the center line, to define them more. And if you want to create an open mouth, this process is simply repeated to more of an extreme. I do have an older custom video about opening up the mouth, which shows it in more detail. But here I'm just looking to create a more defined center of the lips. I also use the pointed end of a straight or curved scalpel to scrape carefully away at the center line, smoothing it out further. It's very important to check the thickness of the material you're working with periodically. Hold the faceplate up to a bright light, this isn't the best example, and look for lighter, thinner areas where the plastic might be getting dangerously thin, just so you know not to push it too far. To continue reshaping the lips, I use a scalpel usually to either cut or to scrape away at the more protruding parts where the original lip line was to make them better fit the new lip shape. I also use files to add more subtle shaping, leaving usually a central kind of bulbous area in the upper lip, as well as filing and pushing in the two sides of the mouth. I use a flat file to take away the pointed tip of the nose often. Here I'm following the outline that I drew at the start, and I'm gently reshaping the eye hole. Nothing too extreme, and I'm just going back and forth with a scalpel, sort of scraping and flicking away little shards of plastic. At this stage, a lot of the reshaping of the face is done. As you can see, it's still looking really rough, and I go back in again with a curved scalpel blade and really try to clean up the marks that I made. Once it's as good as I can get that way, I'll move on to sandpapering again. Now, you could start with something as low as 400 grit if your faceplate is quite rough, but I think that's too harsh. Again, I prefer to start with maybe 500, 600, and piece by piece work my way all the way up to something like 1200. Again, it's essential to wear a dust mask, and I recommend spraying the face with a water mister, as this will help reduce the particles in the air. Sanding is definitely the least fun and most tedious part of this. If you're looking to get into difficult shapes, you can roll up pieces of sandpaper, you can wrap them around pieces of wood or perhaps nail files, things that will give you more grip on the sandpaper and help you get into narrow and awkward areas. You just have to be very patient and starting with your lowest number grit, get all the scratches out that you can before moving up to the next grade of sandpaper. When you think you might be done, I really swear by wetting a magic eraser sponge and rubbing the face all over and looking really closely under a bright light, because the wetness really helps show up remaining fine scratches, so you know where to go back to and work more. Hours or days later, we're ready to finally move on to the face up. Here I put together a funny little stand to hold the head while I spray it with some light coats of Mr. Super Clear matte or flat sealant spray, ideally UV cut. Wear a ventilator mask, be in a well ventilated place, and let each coat set for at least 30 minutes. Just set a timer. For the face up, my tried and tested favourite tools are pan pastels, soft rounded brushes, maybe makeup brushes, very fine tipped nail brushes, paint brushes, and tiny cotton buds, and also watercolour pencils in various colours. For glossing, I like to use the Tamiya X22 clear gloss varnish. There's 1,000 ways that the eyelids could be customised using pan pastel in a complementary or contrasting colour. You could paint them with acrylic paints. You could use nail decals, stickers, or even fabric. Just have fun with it. For areas like the lips, I'll apply the pastel with a small brush, trying not to go outside my intended area, but any messy bits can be cleaned up with a magic eraser sponge or a kneaded eraser. Otherwise, I'll use larger brushes and blend out the pastels for more realistic areas of colouring on the nose, cheeks, forehead, around the ears, just trying to give the face more life. If you're looking for a super realistic face-up, then consider studying this type of image, which shows the sort of subdermal general colouring of the face. You can use this to apply pastels in certain areas of the face for realism. Another extra level of realism I've used a few times is to use a pale blue watercolor pencil, very well sharpened, and lightly drawing veins on the face in certain areas, usually around the forehead, around the eyes, mouth and chin. I keep it very light and once it's been sprayed with MSC, it usually knocks it back just a little bit more too. The pastel powder will need to be sealed with another coat of Mr. Super Clear spray and left to cure before you can build up more deeper areas of colour. Initially they will look quite light. I usually brush in a little pastel to help indicate where I want the eyebrows to lay, and then I will go in with a sharp pencil and start drawing in fine lines. Sometimes I'll use a brush and a little watercolour paint for this instead. Features like the eyebrows are also built up over several layers of colour. There's no single right answer as to how many layers a face-up should take. It's really just down to your level of confidence and how much colour, saturation, detail you're comfortable with leaving before it gets sealed with its next coat of MSC. You can think of each coat as saving your progress because it will protect the colours you've put down. It's also creating a fresh surface for pastels and pencils to grip onto again, because the paper-like surface created by MSC kind of gets filled up with the pastels and pigment. You might also want to draw in makeup like eyeliner. Here I had penciled it in with a brown watercolour pencil before coming back with some acrylic paint and a very fine brush and painting it in for a really saturated finish. You can do the same with the eyelids, add whatever kind of painted details you want there too. Personally, I quite like adding a little additional detail under the eyes. I usually add some white pencil directly on the waterline, and I'll add a little pink detailing for the inner corners of the eye too. It's just a little extra something. I also often add freckles or blemishes, either splattered with a brush in watercolour paint or individually drawn in with pencils. Once sealed, I finish off the eyelids with some human fake eyelashes, just cut down to size. I usually cut one pair in half, it's about the right size, and with a little line of tacky glue along the edge, I just push it back into the ridge the original ones came out of. Eye chips are a whole thing. You can buy them, you can make them, but as long as they fit, 14 millimeters is the size, they can be attached back to the eye mechanism with a few little dots of, I use tacky glue, not too much, and something that you can unstick again if you need to change them out in the future. Just a few little dots spread around the rim like so, and then drop the eye chips in. Make sure they're oriented the right way. So whether you're placing them from the inside of the head or the outside of the head, just make sure that when rotated, they'll be facing the correct way. Now for glossing the lips, as I said earlier, I like to use a glossy varnish. I'll carefully paint it on with a small brush, let it dry, and for a nice smooth glossy finish I will use 2 coats, being careful to let it dry fully in between and after. Next I'll cover a couple of the mods or modifications that people often make before putting the doll back together. The first is boggling the eyes. Now this is where we remove a little piece of the eyelid mechanism so that when replaced, the eyelids are able to open a little further than they could initially. You see here the plastic hits this little sticking out stopper when it rotates, which would be when the cord pulls the eyelids open, and by removing a little material where it hits, we let the eyelids open just that little bit further, which some people like. This modification is usually done just with a sharp scalpel, and only 2 or 3 millimeters are taken away. When putting the eyes back in, the side with the little stepped notches goes on the left, and then I have the stem on the right hand side, which I'll align and push through the white plastic in the middle of the mechanism. Make sure the little sticky out bit goes into the eyelid part, and then we use our flat-headed screwdriver once more and gently pry apart the two sides until the little nub on the right can be pushed in. Always double check your mechanism as you go, making sure it still works at each point before you progress. Now, without the T-bar reinstalled, the eyes have no stopping point, so they're just going to swivel freely. So we put back in the T-bar, and I'll show you another modification here, but you can see how it works. These little notches on the right actually hit the T-bar and prevent the eyes from just rolling past. The T-bar modification is called gaze correction and involves using a scalpel again to cut off just 1 or 2 or 3 millimeters from the very tip of the T-bar, being careful to maintain the angle that it has. It just helps the gear stop in place more securely. If this is angled the wrong way or is flat, blunt, it's more likely that the mechanism will slip off, and this can be a common error. If the T-bar is cut too short, it also stops the eyes from functioning. The result of this mod is that the eyes have more of an upward gaze. Cut too short, it's possible to see the next set of eyes peeking up from below, which isn't very appealing. I like to add a second pull cord instead of the spring, which lets me leave the eyelids closed or change the position of them more easily. You can use the same size cord as the cord that came originally, and just be careful to tie your knots as follows. The upper knot should be on the right hand side, and the lower cord should have its knot on the left hand side. I have two different widths simply because I'd bought a larger size, but it wouldn't fit through the space in the lower part of the head. It's a nylon cord that you need to use, and it can be trimmed and singed with a lighter to stop it from fraying. Again, test your mechanism before progressing. Pull each cord out away from the face. The lower one will be naturally pulled more upwards. The lower cord will come out of the little round hole where the cord originally was, and the new sleep cord will come out of one of the square spaces in the back. I like to hold the cord against the doll to check for the length before I trim it. At this point, you can add back your pull rings or beads or charms just to stop the cords from accidentally getting pulled back through the head. And making sure nothing's tangled inside, we can add the scalp back to the front faceplate. You can loosely attach the screw so that you can hook the scalp in before tightening properly with a Phillips head screwdriver. Making sure no hair is trapped in the seam, we can roughly attach the back plate, leaving the bottom open, to reattach the body, onto which I've already installed one of our handy-dandy neck joints for added neck articulation, available now at bethramsden.com. And then we can close up the back of the head, just being careful to align everything on the inside and pushing each side together. It should click. You can press on the side of the forehead just in front of the ears if you're not managing to get that to click. And then finally we will reattach the 3 screws to the back, taking note that one screw is a slightly different size. Then once again we will test our mechanism to make sure everything's working before we go any further. And apart from maybe a haircut and a new wardrobe, your doll might be complete. I do hope this was clear enough. I know some of the clips are kind of out of order because of the particular project that the clips were taken from, but please do check out my Customising Dolls playlist over on YouTube, where a lot more processes are shown in greater detail. Also check out the FAQ page on my website bethramsden.com, and if you don't find the answers you're looking for there, just contact me and ask me. I'll always be happy to help if I can. Thank you so much for watching today. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.